So I'm going to talk about genetic diversity and adaptation. So natural selection, we can see some examples with Darwin's finches and the peppered moth below that you've probably heard about before. So here's a useful mnemonic you can use to help you with any types of natural selection or types of selection answer, even when using graphs, which we're going to look at in a minute. Biologically, it doesn't make a huge amount of sense, but it works. So vicious monkeys and snakes rip people apart. So V, variation, that's due to random mutation. Mutation creates new alleles. So that might be the alleles that are now favourable, that help the organism survive in hostile environments or changing selection pressure. Advantage, those with the new mutation have a selective advantage. Survival, those with the new allele will be more likely to survive. As a result of that, they'll be more likely to reproduce, and they will pass on more of those new alleles to the next generation. So the allele frequency of the new alleles increases over many generations. It's important in your answer to use the words like more, because it's really a comparison between those that have the new alleles and those that don't. So if you don't use comparative language, you won't gain marks. So looking at natural selection in action, there's three types. The first is directional selection, and this is your classic antibiotic resistance, which you'll have studied at GCSE. So in this example, let's use the vicious monkeys and snakes rip people apart mnemonic. So variations due to random mutation, that's created alleles for high drug resistance. Those with a higher drug resistance are better adapted against the selection pressure, which is antibiotics. And so whilst antibiotics are taken, they're more likely to survive. Those with a higher drug resistance are more likely to reproduce. They'll produce more offspring. It's repeated over many generations. So the frequency of the drug resistance alleles increases. You can see that here. So we've got more with a higher drug resistance. How can you tell when you've got directional selection from a graph? It's because the mean shifts to the favoured extreme. So either end of the scale, in this case of phenotypes, it could be genotypes as well. Either end at the extremes, so the mean shifts toward the favoured extreme being high drug resistance. So you've got more with higher drug resistance. Stabilising selection can occur. And the example you need to know for the speckle that could give you any application question with this is for birth mass. So in stabilising selection, as you can see from this example, over time the standard deviation gets smaller, the range gets smaller, so you can see it sort of pinches together in the middle. The mean stays the same crucially, so you get more in the population, more individuals in the population, more with the mean phenotype, or this could be genotypes as well. So let's use the vicious monkeys mnemonic to have a look at what's going on. So in this example, both extremes are selected against, so both high birth mass and low birth mass. So variation due to mutation creates a variety of alleles for birth mass. Those with a birth mass below 6 pounds, you can see here, are less likely to survive. Those with a birth mass above 8.5 pounds are less likely to survive. So they're less likely to reproduce, so they produce less offspring with the high and low birth mass alleles. It's repeated over many generations, so the frequency of extreme alleles, those with high and low birth mass, decreases over time. It's important if you're given figures on a graph to use them, so for which ones are more likely to survive or less likely to survive, as a result more likely to reproduce or less likely to reproduce. The final type is disruptive selection. So this is within the same species, and an example is salmon, or more specifically male salmon. So why on earth do you get different masses forming? Well, the larger males are adapted to sort of fight off other males and access the eggs released by females. Smaller males, on the other hand, can sort of sneak in. They've got a sneaking technique, so they can sneak in and fertilise the eggs without the larger males noticing. so they are more likely to pass on their alleles as well. So let's use the vicious monkeys analogy again. So in this case, how can you tell with the graph where you've got both extremes are selected for? So the vicious monkeys then. So variation due to mutation created a variety of alleles for male body size. Those with a body size, don't forget to use the figures, of 50 grams and 100 grams are more likely to reproduce. So they will produce more offspring with these alleles. This is repeated over many generations. The frequency of extreme alleles, those with high and low body size, are more likely to survive, so the frequency of high and low body size alleles increases in the population.